German verb prefixes are a mess. This one separates, this one doesn't, that one can do both, and this verb has two of them. Now I don't know how many videos you have watched on this topic, but this will be the last one. Seriously. I'm gonna break down all the grammar behind separable and inseparable verbs, and I'll even get into something that I haven't seen any German teacher talk about ever. So make sure to watch the whole video, because by the end you'll understand verb prefixes 100%. Tag an alle, my name is Florian and I've been teaching German for almost 10 years. And in all these years, questions about one specific topic have popped up more often than about others. Why the hell is there sometimes a little word at the end of the sentence? Like in this one, steht jeden Morgen 9 Uhr auf. But how did it end up there, and why does not every prefix do that? This is exactly what I'm going to cover in today's video, so buckle up because you're in for a long flight. As always, let's start at the very beginning. What is a prefix? A prefix is a type of affix. Well, what is an affix? An affix is a little word or just some letters that are attached to a stem. If an affix is attached to the end of the word, we call it a suffix. And if it is attached to the beginning, well, then we have a prefix. So now that you know what that is, let's zoom in on verb prefixes in German. For this example, I'm going to be using the verb nehmen, to take, and attach three different prefixes to it. Unternehmen, to undertake, wegnehmen, to take away, and abnehmen, to lose weight. As you can see by the first verb, English makes use of verb prefixes as well. If you did something by accident, you can undo it. If you want a complete overhaul, you can redo it. And if you overdo it, you'll just have to scrap the whole idea. And this is exactly how their German counterparts work. Einnehmen, aufnehmen, vornehmen, zurücknehmen. Every prefix customizes the base verb and assigns a unique meaning to it. However, there's a much bigger group of verbs in English that work in a similar way, phrasal verbs. But instead of using a prefix, a separate particle is added at the end to change the meaning of the base verb. And these changes can be kinda radical. You can throw out the soup, but you shouldn't throw it up. It is okay to pass by a cemetery, but don't pass away there. And while German verbs always have the prefix attached to the beginning of the word, changing that prefix can lead to the same radical changes in meaning, just like in phrasal verbs. Abholen means to pick up. Aufholen means to catch up, and sich einen runterholen means to jerk off, so please watch out. But what about the third example? Why does abnehmen mean to lose weight? Well, as you might have guessed already, you can't always translate them directly, although pretty often it still makes sense on an intuitive level. Abnehmen literally translates to take off, and taking off fat from your body is the general idea of losing weight. And by the way, this can be a pretty fun game to play if you want to learn vocabulary. Take a German word with a prefix, translate it directly, try to guess the meaning of it, and then look it up to see if you got it right. For example, vorhaben literally means to have something in front of you. Can you guess the real translation? Well, it means to plan on doing something. You basically have the plan or intention right in front of you. Or einlegen, which literally says to lay in. Any ideas? This one is to pickle, because you lay or place the cucumbers in vinegar. Once you get the hang of this, learning vocabulary will actually become quite enjoyable and effective as well. So let's dive one level deeper and take a look at the three types of prefixes. All German prefixes can be divided into one of three different categories. Separable prefixes, which make up the bulk of them. Inseparable prefixes, with exactly 9 in number. And mixed prefixes that can do both, and depending on whether they separate or not, their meaning changes, but you'll see what I mean a bit later. From now on, I'll be using the color orange to mark separable prefixes and gray for inseparable ones. This will make it easier for you to recognize and distinguish them. Now, what does it actually mean for a prefix to be separable or inseparable? Well, let's take a look at basic German word order. Every German main clause has 4 positions, or fields, how we call them in German. In the first field you have whatever, usually the subject. The second field is always reserved for the main verb. The rest of the sentence falls into the third field. And if you have 2 verbs, the second one goes to the fourth and last field. Ich gehe nach Hause, I'm going home. Ich will nach Hause gehen, I want to go home. The verb gehen is a base verb though, and if we attach an inseparable prefix, for example, fair, turning gehen into vergehen, to pass or to fly by, as in time passes, the meaning changes, but the grammar stays the same. Die Zeit vergeht schnell, time passes quickly. However, if we attach a separable prefix to the word gehen, for example, weg, we get the word weggehen, to go away. This actually changes the grammar. You keep the root of the verb in the second field, but you place the prefix in the last field. So if you want to say it'll go away soon, it is not es weggeht bald, but es geht bald weg. Literally, it goes soon away. Now, this piece of grammar is one of the weirdest things German has to offer, and it will take some time to get accustomed to. Having explained this very important foundation, let's take a closer look at inseparable prefixes. It makes sense to learn them first because there are only 9, and once you've memorized them, you can easily spot them in a verb. Ready? Here we go. Like in erfinden, to invent, or erhöhen, to increase. Like in bestellen, to order, or benutzen, to use. Like in zerstören, to destroy, or zerreißen, to tear apart. Like in verstehen, to understand, or verbessern, to improve. Like in entfernen, to remove, or enteignen, to expropriate. Like in empfehlen, to recommend, or empfinden, to sense, to perceive. Like in gehören, to belong, or gedenken, to commemorate. Like in misshandeln, to abuse, or missachten, to disregard or disobey. And finally, hinter, like in hintergehen, to betray, or hinterfragen, to question, as in questioning authority. Now, if you have a very good ear, you might have noticed something. The intonation or the stress of the verb is never on the prefix. And that is true for every inseparable verb. Erhalten, verbrauchen, besuchen, hinterlassen. Keep that in mind because it's very important. Besides that, verbs with inseparable prefixes do not contain g in their participle. So the verb besuchen, to visit, has the following forms. Besuchen, besuchte, besucht, not begesucht. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can click on this info card right here to get straight to my video about the past tense. One last thing that is true for every verb, you only have to learn the base verb. In 99% of cases, adding a prefix does nothing to the conjugation of that base verb. For example, the word halten, to hold, is irregular. Halten, hielt, gehalten. And it belongs to the A to A class, so ich halte, du hältst, sie es hält, etc. If we add the inseparable prefix end to get enthalten, to contain, you already know the conjugation. Enthalten, enthielt, enthalten. Remember, no g in the participle. And in the present as well. Ich enthalte, du enthältst, sie es enthält, and so on. Isn't that cool? This will cut the time for your vocabulary learning manifold. Anyway, let's move on to the second and largest group, separable prefixes. Once you've learned the inseparable prefixes as well as the mixed prefixes, which I'll show after this bit, all other prefixes are separable. I definitely won't be able to show you all of them, but I'll cover the most important ones. Ab, like in abbrechen, to break off, or abholen, to pick up. An, like in anfangen, to start doing something, or angeben, to show off. Auf, like in aufmachen, to open, or aufgeben, to give up. Aus, like in ausrechnen, to calculate, or austrinken, to drink up. Bei, like in beitreten, to join, or beistehen, to support emotionally. Watch out, don't confuse the separable bei with the inseparable b. These are different. Ein, like in einkaufen, to buy groceries, or einladen, to invite. Hin, like in hinhören, to listen attentively, or hinsehen, to take a closer look. Her, like in herstellen, to produce, or herhalten, to serve as a substitute. Mit, like in mitnehmen, to take with you, or mitarbeiten, to also work or to collaborate. Nach, like in nachahmen, to imitate, or nachreichen, to hand in later. Vor, like in vorstellen, to introduce, or vorwerfen, to accuse. Weg, like in wegschmeißen, to throw away, or wegrennen, to run away. Zu, like in zumachen, to close, or zugehen, to approach or to walk towards. Be careful here as well. Don't confuse the prefix zu with the zu infinitive that you'd use with an auxiliary verb. If you have an auxiliary verb that is not a modal verb and you'd use it with a verb containing the prefix zu, you actually get two of them. Ich versuche zuzuhören. I'm trying to listen carefully. And if you build a sentence, for whatever reason, with the adverb zu, meaning too much of something, you'd actually have three. Ich versuche nicht zu viel zuzunehmen. I'm trying to not gain too much weight. Anyway, German is crazy and I'm going off topic. Now please remember that many of these prefixes also serve as prepositions. But while prepositions are always before a noun, prefixes are either attached to the verb or at the end of the sentence. Let's use the verb aufpassen, auf plus Akkusativ, to look after somebody or something as an example. The first auf is the prefix that goes to the end of the sentence. The second auf is the preposition that modifies the object. So the sentence I'm looking after her cat is Ich passe auf ihre Katze auf. Here we have the preposition in front of the noun Katze, cat, and the prefix at the end of the sentence. Saying Ich passe auf ihre Katze is grammatically incorrect. Anyway, did you notice something about the pronunciation again? Aufpassen, einkaufen, vorstellen. Exactly, the stress is always on the prefix. Even if you use the verb in different tenses, the emphasis doesn't change. Oh, and speaking of tenses, the participle of separable verbs does indeed contain g, and it is in between the prefix and the stem. Let's use the example verb einfügen, to paste, as in to copy and paste, to see how it works. Einfügen, fügte ein, eingefügt. There it is. Now the question arises as to in which situations we separate the prefix at all. And the answer is surprisingly easy. It is just the Präsens, the present tense, and the Präteritum, the simple past. And that's it. As soon as you have any other verb in the sentence that modifies the separable verb, you either use the infinitive, as in Ich kann den Text nicht einfügen, I can't paste the text, or the participle Ich habe den Text eingefügt, I've pasted the text. If you want me to make a video about how separable and inseparable verbs work in different tenses, don't hesitate to let me know in the comments. Now, armed with this knowledge, let's talk about mixed prefixes. Now, these are kind of insidious because the same prefix can do both. It can separate and it can stick to the verb. And more often than not, it completely changes the meaning. Luckily for you, there are only 7 prefixes in this group with varying frequency of use. I'll go through every one of them individually and give you an example for the separable and inseparable version. And to remind you once again, if the stress falls on the prefix, it separates. If it falls on the stem, it doesn't. So let's give it a shot. The first mixed prefix is durch. For example, durchatmen, to catch a breath, which is separable. Atme erst einmal tief durch. First, take a deep breath. However, if we take a look at the verb durchqueren, to pass through, this durch is inseparable. Sie durchqueren gerade einen riesigen Wald. They are currently passing through a huge forest. The next prefix is über. Überlaufen, to flow or spill over, separable. Hey, die Regentonne läuft über. Hey, the rain barrel is overflowing. Übersetzen, to translate, inseparable. Übersetzt du heute den Text? Are you going to translate the text today? Alright, let's move on to unter. Untergehen, to go down, to sink or to set, as in the sun sets, separable. Die Sonne geht heute 20 Uhr unter. The sun sets at 8 p.m. today. But unterdrücken, to oppress, inseparable. Der Diktator unterdrückt das Volk. The dictator oppresses the people. Now the next one is usually responsible for all the fuss about mixed prefixes. The verb umfahren is separable and it means to run over or knock over with a vehicle. But the verb umfahren is inseparable and it means to drive around. So fährt alle Pylonen he's knocking over all the traffic cones, and umfährt alle Pylonen, he's driving around all the traffic cones, are complete opposites to each other, which is just great. There are pairs like this one with other prefixes as well, but they occur much less frequently. Anyway, here's the next one, voll, as in volltanken, to fill up at the gas station, to top up. Separable. Ich tanke nie unter 100 Euro voll. I never fill up for less than 100 euros. However, vollenden, to complete or to finalize, inseparable. vollendet jedes Gemälde mit seiner Unterschrift. He completes every painting with his signature. And the last two prefixes which have the same pronunciation but are spelled differently. Wieder with an IE as in again, and wieder with just an E as in against. Let's start with the first one, and yeah, there's also a commonly used pair here. Wiederholen, to retrieve or to bring back, which is separable. Hol bitte den Ball wieder, bring back the ball please. Compare that to wiederholen, to repeat, which is inseparable. Wiederholen Sie bitte alle Vokabeln. Please repeat all the vocabulary. Then we have wieder with just E. For example, widerspiegeln, to reflect, is separable. Das spiegelt die Probleme der Gesellschaft wider. That reflects the problems of society. And widersprechen, to contradict, is inseparable. Widerspricht sich oft selbst. He often contradicts himself. And that's it. To be fair, there aren't too many perfect pairs like umfahren, umfahren, or wiederholen, wiederholen, and you usually use one over the other. For example, both übersetzen and übersetzen exist, but we rarely use the first one because it means to ferry over. And unless you own a ferry or regularly ride one, this word will practically never pop up in an ordinary conversation. The inseparable übersetzen means to translate though, which is much more important to know. So it's enough for you to learn that verb and skip the uncommon one. My advice is to just learn that info together with the verb, as you might already do with nouns and their articles. You can do it like me and mark separable prefixes orange and inseparable ones gray. And all of that is the information you need to actually understand these verbs. You will notice that after learning a few hundreds of them, you'll actually get a pretty good intuition on what certain prefixes do and what verbs they modify. However, if you want me to cover all prefixes and their meaning in a mini-series on this channel, make sure to drop a comment. Now, there is a thing I haven't seen any other German teacher talk about at all, and that thing is verbs with multiple prefixes. Maybe during your German studies, you've come across a verb that seems to have multiple prefixes, not just one. And yeah, this is not just your imagination, this is actually a thing. So, how does it work? If a verb has additional prefixes in the beginning, they have an effect on the already existing ones. Both separable and inseparable prefixes can fulfill that role, and every combination of them is possible. We can find verbs with the following prefix orders. Inseparable, as in missverstehen, to misunderstand, or verbeamten, to give somebody the status of civil servant. Yeah, we actually have a word for that. However, to my current knowledge, these are the only two verbs with a double inseparable prefix. And obviously, no prefix is separated here at all. Anyway, the next group is inseparable separable. For example, bemitleiden, to pity or to feel sorry for. Verabreichen, to administer, usually medicine, or bevormunden, to patronize. And although these verbs have a separable prefix close to the stem, neither does it separate, nor does the participle of that verb contain g. It is der Arzt hat ihm Ibuprofen verabreicht, not verabgereicht. The next, much bigger group is separable inseparable. For example, vorverlegen, to reschedule at an earlier time. Abbestellen, to unsubscribe from a newspaper or magazine, or anerkennen, to acknowledge or to officially recognize. This group is kind of weird because these verbs behave like normal separable verbs in the present tense, so the prefix is placed at the end of the sentence. Ich bestelle die Bild bald ab. I'll soon cancel my subscription with the Bild newspaper. However, as soon as you put this verb in the participle, it behaves like an inseparable verb with no g in the root. Ich habe die Bild abbestellt. Keep that in mind. And finally, we have the fourth group, separable, as in wiederherstellen, to restore, wieder aufnehmen, to resume, or wieder einführen, to reintroduce. As you can see, verbs in this category start with the prefix wieder, and the funny thing is that you actually separate both of them and put them next to each other at the end of the sentence. So they are reintroducing an old law would sound and be written like this. Sie führen ein altes Gesetz wieder ein. The order of the prefixes stays the same, but they both separate from each other. Now this group would be much bigger if it wasn't for one exception. For some reason there are a bunch of double prefixes that are separated together. Herbei, hinzu, voraus, vorweg, hinterher, etc. And this is in fact the largest group of them all. Unfortunately, you have to learn these prefixes by heart, but you'll soon see a pattern that makes them stand out. Here are some examples of how they work. Seine Fans laufen ihm hinterher. His fans follow him around. Geben Sie nun 50 Gramm Butter hinzu. Now please add 50 grams of butter. Sie hat die Katastrophe vorhergesehen. She saw the catastrophe coming. As you can see, these double prefixes work like a single one, also in the past. Alright, are you ready for one last fun fact? There is exactly one verb with 3 distinct prefixes, 2 of which separate individually, mit einbeziehen. Here, if you don't believe me. Ziehen means to pull or to drag. Sich auf etwas beziehen means to reference or to refer to something. Einbeziehen means to involve somebody or to factor something in. And finally, mit einbeziehen means to also involve or include somebody or something in the process. The prefix mit is grammaticalized here. Except for this verb, this doesn't happen anywhere else. You can use mit with other words as well, but you'll have to write it separately in that case. To sum things up, verb prefixes can get pretty crazy, but if you learn the rules I've laid out in this video, you're gonna be fine. Try to view learning them more like an adventure rather than a chore, because some of them can alter the meaning of the base verb to such an extent that you can get some pretty interesting meanings. If you add the prefix vor to arbeiten, to work, you get vorarbeiten. It means something along the lines of to work ahead or in advance, and it expresses working on projects and tasks that you were only supposed to be doing in a few weeks or later on. The same is true for nacharbeiten, to post work, if there's stuff you should have done long ago. Or take the word nachvollziehen. Typically used in the phrase ich kann das gut nachvollziehen, this verb expresses the ability to relate or understand someone's feelings by looking at the situation from their perspective, or because you've gone through the same process. And these are only a few examples. The more you learn, the more you might be surprised at what you find. Always stay curious. Alright guys, you finally made it! You've learned almost everything there is to know about verb prefixes in one video. Now you have the foundation to just go out there and collect one interesting verb after another. This video was also a lot of work to make, so if it helped you understand verb prefixes, make sure to like and subscribe and drop a comment if there's anything left unclear. Thank you so much for watching and haut rein!